We call it dead load failure when a building collapses under its own weight. I built half of Seattle, but tonight my own foundation crumbled. My son Julian smiled as he fixed my tie, a look I mistook for love until my wife showed me evidence that nearly stopped my 68-year-old heart. Where are you watching from? Comment your city below. This warning might save your life. Don't trust blood. Trust only the truth. My name is Robert Vance, and for 45 years, I have spoken the language of steel and stone better than I have ever spoken to any human being. Standing here tonight on the 110th floor of the Vance Tower, I should have felt like a god looking down on his creation. The floor beneath my feet was a slab of post-tensioned concrete 18 inches thick, reinforced with rebar that I had personally inspected before the pour. The glass walls surrounding us were 3 inches of laminated safety glazing, tested to withstand winds of 140 miles per hour. I knew the tensile strength of every bolt and the load-bearing capacity of every column in this building. It was the tallest structure in Seattle, a needle of light piercing the rain-heavy clouds, and it was supposed to be my legacy. I adjusted my cuff, feeling the weight of the Rolex Martha had given me for our 40th anniversary. The ballroom was alive with the hum of 300 of the city's wealthiest elites. There were investors, city council members, and competitors who had spent decades waiting for me to fail, all drinking my champagne and shaking my hand. They called me a visionary. They called the Vance Tower a marvel of modern engineering. But as I looked out at the glittering grid of the city below, I did not feel like a visionary. I felt like an old building that had weathered too many winters. My joints ached with a dull, persistent throb that no amount of aspirin could touch, and my heart, that traitorous pump, fluttered in my chest like a bird trapped in a chimney. I am 68 years old today, in the construction business that makes me vintage. I founded Apex Structural Solutions when Seattle was still waking up from its Timbertown roots. I built this company on the philosophy that gravity is the only law that matters. You cannot bribe gravity. You cannot negotiate with physics. If your math is wrong, the building falls. It is a brutal, honest world, and I loved it. I looked at the massive steel truss exposed in the ceiling, an architectural choice I had fought for. Most architects want to hide the bones of a building covering the steel with drywall and plaster. I wanted people to see what was holding them up. I wanted them to respect the skeleton. Dad, you are brooding again. The voice cut through my internal structural analysis. I turned to see Julian, my son, my only child. At 35 years old, Julian was everything I was not. He was polished, charming, and understood the social dynamics of a boardroom in a way I never could. He wore a navy Italian suit that probably cost more than my first car, and he wore it with the casual confidence of a man who has never had to scrub concrete dust out of his fingernails. He was the chief financial officer of Apex, the face of the future. I was the engineer. He was the empire builder. I am not brooding, I said, my voice sounding gravelly even to my own ears. I am inspecting. There is a vibration in the floor panels near the orchestra. The dampers might need a micro-adjustment. Julian laughed, a bright, easy sound that made the nearby guests smile. He placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. His grip was soft, uncalloused. The building is perfect, Dad. You are the only one who can feel a millimeter of sway. Tonight is not about work. It is about you. It is about the Vance legacy. Legacy. He used that word a lot lately. For Julian, a legacy was something you leveraged for lines of credit and brand partnerships. For me, a legacy was knowing that when the next earthquake hit the Pacific Northwest, the people inside my buildings would survive. You look pale, Julian said, his smile fading into a look of concern. He stepped closer, blocking the view of the room, creating a small, intimate bubble amidst the chaos of the party. Did you take your medication this afternoon? Dr. Evans said you cannot skip a dose, especially with all this excitement. I waved him off, annoyed by the reminder of my frailty. I am fine, Julian. Just tired. It has been a long week. Dad, he said, his tone firm but affectionate. Health is wealth. You built the tallest tower in Washington, but it does not mean anything if you are not around to enjoy the view. Wait here. He turned and signaled to a waiter with a snap of his fingers. Within seconds, he had a bottle of water. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, not my jacket but his, and pulled out the small amber pill bottle he had started carrying for me. He insisted on it a month ago, saying I was too forgetful, that he needed to be the guardian of my health. It touched me honestly. I had spent his childhood working 18-hour days, missing baseball games and school plays, to pour foundations and erect steel frames. I had been a distant father, a provider of structure but not warmth. Seeing him step up now, caring for his aging father with such diligence, made me feel that perhaps I had not failed him completely. Here, Julian said, shaking 2 small white pills into his palm. Digoxin. 2 pills, just like the prescription says. I looked at the pills. They looked identical to the ones I took every morning, small and chalky. I hesitated, feeling a flash of irritation at being mothered in the middle of my own party, but the flutter in my chest was undeniable. My heart was skipping beats, a syncopated rhythm that made me feel lightheaded. Thank you, son, I said, taking the pills and swallowing them with a long draught of water. Good man, Julian said, patting my back. I want you to be strong for the toast. The investors are watching. The board is watching. They need to see that Robert Vance is still made of iron. Steel, I corrected automatically. Iron is too brittle. Julian chuckled. Steel. Right. I am going to go check on the catering. Do not wander off. I have a surprise for you later. He disappeared into the crowd, shaking hands and flashing that $1,000,000 smile. I watched him go, feeling a swell of pride mixed with a strange, heavy melancholy. He was good at this. Better than I ever was. I built the walls, but Julian filled the rooms. He had secured the financing for the Vance Tower when the banks were getting cold feet. He had navigated the zoning laws and the city permits. He was the reason we were standing here. I turned back to the window, pressing my hand against the cool glass. The city lights blurred for a second. I blinked, shaking my head. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over me, a sensation of weightlessness that was terrifying for a man who lived by the laws of gravity. The floor seemed to tilt 5 degrees to the left. I gripped the steel railing that ran along the window, my knuckles turning white. Fatigue, I told myself. Just fatigue. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, reviewing the final safety inspections. I was 68, not 38. My body was an aging structure suffering from material fatigue. I needed rest. I needed to go home to the silence of my study. I scanned the room for Martha. I needed her grounding presence. I found her standing near the entrance to the service corridor, far away from the center of attention. Martha Vance, my wife of 43 years. She was wearing a deep crimson evening gown that made her silver hair shine like polished chrome. She was not smiling. She was not drinking. She stood with the rigid posture of a sentinel, her eyes locked on something across the room. I followed her gaze. She was watching Julian. Martha had been a corporate litigator before she retired to manage our personal estate. She had a mind like a diamond cutter, sharp, precise, and capable of finding flaws in things that looked perfect to everyone else. She had never fully warmed to Julian's role as CFO. She called him too eager, too fluid. She often said that Julian treated money like it was a game, whereas I treated it like a resource. I always dismissed her concerns as maternal worry or perhaps a clash of personalities. Julian was a dreamer. Martha was a realist. But tonight the look on her face was not just concern. It was scrutiny. It was the look she used to have when she was cross-examining a witness who she knew was lying. She stood motionless, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, ignoring the other guests who tried to engage her in conversation. The dizziness hit me again, stronger this time. The room spun. The sounds of the string quartet seemed to stretch and distort like a record playing at the wrong speed. I took a deep breath, forcing my lungs to expand. Oxygen, I thought. I just need oxygen. The ventilation system in the tower was state-of-the-art, cycling fresh air every 12 minutes. There was plenty of oxygen. This was internal. I checked my watch. 7:45 in the evening. The main toast was scheduled for 8 o'clock. I had 15 minutes to compose myself. I could not show weakness. Not tonight. Not when the rumors of a hostile takeover were whispering through the industry. If the shark smelled blood in the water, Apex would be torn apart. I pushed myself off the railing and began to navigate through the crowd. I needed to find a chair, or perhaps step out onto the terrace for a moment of raw wind. People reached out to touch me as I passed, congratulating me. Incredible work, Robert. A masterpiece, truly. The view is worth every penny. I nodded, smiled, and kept moving. My legs felt heavy, as if the gravity in the room had increased. My shoes felt like lead weights. Dead load, my mind whispered. The structure is failing. Dad, there you are. Julian appeared in front of me again, blocking my path to the terrace. He looked flushed, excited. His eyes were bright, too bright. He held a crystal tumbler in each hand, filled with an amber liquid that caught the light of the chandeliers. I have been saving this, Julian said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. Macallan. The 1946 vintage. We bought it at auction 5 years ago. Remember? I told you we would open it the day the Vance Tower opened. I looked at the glass. I remembered the auction. It was a chaotic day, and Julian had insisted on the purchase, calling it an investment in celebration. Julian, I do not think I should, I said, feeling the sweat prickle on my forehead. I am feeling a bit uncalibrated. Nonsense, Julian insisted, pressing the heavy glass into my hand. One drink, just one sip to seal the legacy, to the Vance name, to the future. Come on, Dad. Everyone is watching. He was right. The crowd had quieted down slightly, sensing a moment. Dozens of eyes turned toward us. The great Robert Vance and his heir apparent. It was the perfect photo opportunity. I could feel the pressure of their expectations. I did not want to be the frail old man who refused a toast. I wanted to be the titan they believed I was. I looked at Julian. He was smiling that perfect practice smile. But for the first time I noticed something else. A tightness around his eyes. A slight tremor in the hand holding his own glass. Was it excitement? Or was it nerves? To the future, Julian said, raising his glass. To the future, I murmured. I raised the glass to my lips. The smell of the whiskey was rich, peaty, and overwhelming. I prepared myself for the burn, hoping the alcohol might actually settle the strange shaking in my hands. Suddenly a hand clamped around my right wrist. The grip was surprisingly strong, the fingernails digging into my skin through the fabric of my suit jacket. I froze the glass, hovering inches from my mouth. Do not drink that. The voice was low, terrified, and absolute. I turned to see Martha. She had crossed the ballroom with a speed I did not know she possessed. Her face was pale, stripped of all blood, looking like a marble statue of grief. Her eyes were wide, darting from the glass in my hand to Julian's face. Martha, I asked, confused. What is wrong? It is just a toast. It is not a toast, she whispered, her voice trembling, but her grip on my wrist turning into a vice. Drop it, Robert. Drop the glass. Now. Julian stepped back, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he recovered. Mom, you are making a scene. It is 50-year-old Scotch. Dad deserves a taste. He deserves to live. Martha snapped, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the party like a cable snapping under tension. She did not look at Julian. She looked only at me, her eyes pleading, desperate. Robert, please. Listen to me. We have to go. Go. I lowered the glass slowly, the dizziness swirling in my head, mixing with the sudden surge of adrenaline. Go where this is my party. Martha, you are shaking. I am not shaking, she hissed, leaning in close so only I could hear. I am terrified. I was in the security room. I saw the logs. I saw what he did. Who? Him. She jerked her head slightly toward Julian, but she refused to look at him, as if looking at him would turn her to stone. Something is not right, Robert. Something is very, very wrong. Julian laughed, but the sound was brittle now, hollow. Mom, have you been drinking? You are acting paranoid. The security room. What were you doing in there? Checking the foundation, she said, her voice icy. She pulled on my arm hard. Come with me. Now, before it is too late. I looked at my son. He stood there in his magnificent suit, holding his glass, looking at me with an expression of confused concern that felt perfectly manufactured. Then I looked at my wife. The woman who had stood beside me when I was a nobody, mixing concrete in the rain. The woman who never lied. The woman whose instincts had saved me from bad contracts and bad partners for 4 decades. The room tilted again. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. But this time I knew it wasn't just the atrial fibrillation. It was the warning tremor before the collapse. Put the glass down, Robert, Martha commanded, tears welling in her eyes. For the love of God, look at me and trust me. I looked at the whiskey. The dark amber liquid swirled innocently in the crystal. I looked at Julian. He was still smiling, but his eyes were cold. Dead cold. I set the glass down on the passing waiter's tray. Lead the way, I said to Martha. The service corridor smelled of industrial cleaner and ozone, a sharp departure from the scent of expensive perfume and roasted duck in the ballroom. Martha did not let go of my wrist. Her grip was bruising her nails, digging into the soft flesh of my forearm as she dragged me past the catering staff who were busy plating desserts. They looked up surprised to see the guest of honor being hauled away like a wayward child, but Martha's expression dared them to speak. She pushed open a heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" and shoved me inside. It was the secondary server room for the building's internal network. I had designed this room to be the nervous system of the tower, a place of humming black monoliths and blinking green lights chilled to a constant 65 degrees. The noise was a low, steady drone, the sound of terabytes of data flowing through fiber optic cables. It was a place of logic, of binary certainties. Martha locked the door behind us and leaned her back against it, her chest heaving. In the harsh fluorescent light, she looked older than I had ever seen her. The rouge on her cheeks stood out starkly against her pale skin. Martha, I said, rubbing my wrist. The dizziness swirled in my head again, a sickening tilt that made me grab the edge of a server rack for support. What in God's name is happening? You cannot just pull me out of my own party. The investors. Forget the investors, she hissed. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a sleek black tablet. It was not hers. It was an administrator's tablet, the kind used by the building's IT directors. I told you I was checking the foundation. I lied. I was checking the logs. I swiped this from the security desk when the guard was flirting with a waitress. I had a feeling, Robert. A gnawing feeling ever since Julian fired our personal accountant last month without asking you. She tapped the screen with a trembling finger and thrust it toward my face. Something is not right. Look at this. I focused on the screen, fighting the blur in my vision. It was a document editor open to a file that had been saved to the cloud drive shared by the executive board. But the access logs showed it had been created by a user profile named JVanceAdmin only 4 hours ago. It was a press release. I read the headline, and the blood drained from my face so fast I felt my knees buckle. Obituary: Robert Vance, visionary architect of Seattle skyline, dead at 68. I stared at the words. They were black pixels on a white background, banal and terrifying. I read on my breath, catching in my throat. Seattle mourns the loss of Robert Vance, who passed away suddenly this evening, during the inauguration of his crowning achievement, the Vance Tower. Preliminary reports indicate a massive stroke brought on by acute stress and underlying heart conditions. He collapsed shortly after delivering his keynote address. He is survived by his wife Martha and his devoted son Julian, who will immediately assume the role of CEO to honor his father's legacy. My voice was a dry croak. This says I am dead. It is dated for tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. Keep reading, Martha commanded, her voice hard and brittle. Swipe left. I swiped. The screen changed to a banking interface. It was a scheduled transaction on the Apex secure server. I recognized the routing numbers immediately because I had set up the trust fund myself 20 years ago. It was the Vance Family Trust, the ironclad account meant to protect our assets and fund the company's insurance liabilities. The transaction details were simple, brutal, and mathematically precise. Transfer amount $40 million. Recipient JV Holdings Limited. Destination Cayman Islands. Status pending authorization. Trigger condition upload of certified death certificate. I looked at the screen, then at Martha, then back at the screen. My brain, trained to analyze loads and vectors, tried to process the data. It did not make sense. It was an equation that did not balance. Julian was my son. He was the boy I taught to read blueprints. He was the man who had just handed me my medication and told me he loved me. No, I said, shaking my head. The denial was a physical reflex, a safety mechanism. This is a mistake, or a hack. Someone hacked his account. Julian would not steal $40 million. He does not need to steal it. He is the heir. He gets it all eventually. Eventually is not fast enough, Martha said. She stepped away from the door and stood in front of me, grabbing my shoulders. He is in trouble, Robert. Deep trouble. I heard him on the phone 2 days ago screaming at someone about deadlines. He thought I was in the garden, but I was in the solarium. He mentioned the syndicate. He mentioned collateral. He is drowning, and you are his life raft. But he can only use the raft if he breaks it apart. But murder. I whispered the word, and it felt heavy and foreign in my mouth. Planning my obituary. That is, look at the trigger. Robert, Martha shook me. Upload of death certificate. He needs you dead tonight to get that money by tomorrow morning. If the transfer does not clear by Monday, whatever debt he has will swallow him whole. I looked at the banking screen again. The cold logic of it pierced through my emotional defenses. In engineering, we look for the point of failure. We look for the stress fracture that will bring the whole structure down. I was looking at it right now. The timestamp on the press release, the routing number, the trigger condition. It was a blueprint for a demolition. I feel sick, I said, and this time it was not just a figure of speech. My stomach churned, and the edges of my vision began to gray out. My heart gave a violent thud, then paused, then raced to catch up. I clutched the server rack tighter, the metal biting into my palm. I need to sit down. You do not need to sit, Martha said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. You need to vomit. I looked up at her, blinking through the haze. What? The medication, she said. 30 minutes ago, in the private dressing room. I was coming to fix my makeup. The door was ajar. I saw Julian standing by your jacket. He had 2 bottles, Robert. 2 identical amber bottles. He took the one from your pocket, the one the pharmacy filled, and he put it in his own pocket. Then he replaced it with the other one. The memory of the pills I had just swallowed in the ballroom flashed in my mind. Small, white, chalky, just like my digoxin. But digoxin regulates the heart rate. It keeps the rhythm steady. I took them, I rasped. 10 minutes ago. He gave them to me. He poisoned you, Martha said, tears finally spilling over her lashes. He did not just plan this on paper. He executed it. That dizziness, that is not age, that is not excitement. That is your heart reacting to whatever he put in those capsules. the realization hit me harder than any physical blow. The fatigue I had been feeling for weeks, the constant reminders to take my pills. Health is wealth, Dad. Every time he handed me a bottle, he was not extending my life. He was shortening it. He was adjusting the structural integrity of my body, weakening the beams, loosening the bolts, preparing for a controlled implosion. I closed my eyes. I could visualize my own heart as a mechanical pump. I imagined the valves struggling, the electrical signals firing erratically. I was a compromised structure. "We have to go to the hospital," I said, pushing myself off the rack. My legs felt like they were made of water. "Call an ambulance." "No." Martha grabbed my arm again, stopping me. "Think Robert, who controls the security protocols for this building, who hired the security detail for tonight." "Julian," I answered. The name tasted like ash. "If I call 911, the call is routed through the building's switchboard for location verification. He will know. If we try to leave through the main elevators, the security team, his team, will stop us. They will say you are having a medical episode. They will take you to a private room to wait for the paramedics. But the paramedics will never come, or they will come too late. He has written the script, Robert. Collapsed after keynote address. If you collapse now, you are just following his schedule." I stared at the blinking green lights of the servers. We were 110 stories in the air, encased in glass and steel that I had designed to be impenetrable. I had built a fortress, and now my son had turned it into a kill box. The engineer in me took over. The part of me that solved impossible problems, that bridged canyons and held back oceans. Panic was a variable I could not afford. Emotion was a luxury for the living, and right now I was fighting to stay in that category. "He expects a stroke," I said, my voice gaining a shred of steadiness despite the chaotic rhythm of my heart. "He expects me to fall down on that stage. If I disappear, he will come looking. If I make a scene, his security takes me. We are trapped." "We are not trapped," Martha said ferociously. "We are hidden. For now. But we need a plan. We cannot go back out there and pretend everything is fine. You look like you are dying." "I might be," I admitted. The room swayed again. I gritted my teeth. "But I am not dead yet, and I will be damned if I let him cash that check." I looked at the tablet in Martha's hand. The glow of the screen illuminated her face, highlighting the lines of worry and the fierce determination in her eyes. "The money," I said. "The transfer requires a death certificate. That means he cannot kill me here in this room. He needs witnesses. He needs the public spectacle of the grieving son. He needs me to die on stage or in an ambulance somewhere official. He needs the narrative to be perfect." "So we ruin the narrative," Martha said. "We do more than that," I said. My mind was racing, connecting dots, calculating load paths. The dizziness was still there, a constant threat, but the anger was stronger. It was a cold, hard anger like liquid nitrogen poured over steel. We survive, and then we bury him under the weight of his own lies. I looked around the server room. It was secure, but it was not a fortress. Julian had the master keys. He would track us here eventually. We needed to move. We needed to be somewhere he could not see, somewhere I could stabilize the structure of my own body and launch a counterattack. "The penthouse office," I said. "My private study on the top floor. It is not on the main security grid. I hardwired the lock myself. It has a separate ventilation system and a dedicated line out." "Can you make it?" Martha asked, eyeing my trembling hands. "I have to," I said. "But we cannot use the elevators. He will track the call button." "The service stairs." 110 floors, I said grimly. "We are on the 100th, 10 floors up. In my condition, that is like climbing Everest." "I will pull you," Martha said. She took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. Her skin was cool, her grip unyielding. "I will carry you if I have to. But we are not dying tonight, Robert. I did not put up with your late nights and your obsession with concrete for 40 years just to let that ungrateful brat kill you for $40 million. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. I saw the steel in her spine. I saw the woman who had helped me build an empire. "Okay," I said. "To the stairs." I took one last look at the tablet, burning the image of that obituary into my mind. Robert Vance, visionary. "He forgot one thing," I muttered, as I leaned on Martha and moved toward the service door. "What is that?" she asked, opening the door a crack to check the hallway. "He forgot that a building is only as strong as its architect," I said. "And the architect is still pissed off." We slipped out of the server room, leaving the humming machines behind, and began the long, painful climb toward the roof, while below us the music played on for a dead man walking. The climb up the service stairs took 10 minutes, but it felt like 10 years. My heart laboring under the influence of whatever toxin Julian had introduced to my system, beat with a wet, ragged rhythm against my ribs. Martha supported most of my weight, her shoulder wedged under my armpit, her breathing harsh in the echoing concrete stairwell. We did not speak. There was no breath left for words. There was only the scrape of our shoes on the metal steps and the driving will to survive. We reached the 110th floor. The door to the penthouse level was a heavy steel slab, painted a utilitarian gray. Unlike the decorative doors below, this one had no handle, only a small black glass panel set into the wall at eye level. This was my sanctuary, my fortress. I leaned against the wall, fighting the black spots dancing in my vision. I raised my right hand. It was shaking violently. I used my left hand to grip my right wrist, forcing it steady, and pressed my palm against the black glass. A beam of red light scanned my skin, reading the unique topography of my palm and the heat signature of my blood. "Access granted. Welcome, Mr. Vance." The mechanical lock disengaged with a heavy, satisfying clank that sounded like a vault ceiling. I pushed the door open and we stumbled into the cool, silent air of my private office. The room was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of the city grid, far below through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It smelled of old paper leather and the faint metallic scent of drafting ink. Julian hated this room. He called it the cave. He said it was too austere, too disconnected from the modern aesthetic of the company. But that was the point. This was where I thought. This was where I calculated. And tonight, this was where I would solve the equation of my own murder. "Sit," Martha commanded, guiding me to the leather Eames chair behind my massive oak desk. "I will get water from the private bathroom. Do not pass out on me, Robert." I slumped into the chair, the familiar leather creaking beneath me. I spun toward the computer monitor's 3 curved screens that formed a cockpit of information. I tapped the keyboard. The screens flared to life, casting a blue pallor over the room. The system demanded a password, then a retina scan, then a voice authorization. I provided them all. Julian had the keys to the kingdom downstairs, but up here I was still the king. "Okay," I whispered to the humming machine. "Let us see the load-bearing walls." I bypassed the user-friendly interface that Julian had commissioned for the executive board. That interface was just drywall, pretty paint covering the structural reality. I went straight into the back end, the raw database where every transaction, every invoice, and every movement of capital was recorded in cold, hard numbers. I felt a shift in my brain. The panic began to recede, replaced by the icy, detached focus of a forensic engineer. When a bridge collapses, you do not cry over the wreckage. You look for the point of failure. You look for the rust, the fatigue, the missing bolt. I started with the company's liquidity. On the surface, Apex Structural Solutions was thriving. Our quarterly report showed steady growth. But as I drilled down into the operational accounts, the accounts Julian managed exclusively, I saw the cracks. They were hairline fractures at first. Small transfers of $50,000, here $80,000. They're labeled as consulting fees or vendor retainers. But like any structural flaw, they grew. I traced the money. It flowed out of Apex and into a labyrinth of shell companies with names that sounded legitimate but meant nothing. Northwest Logistics, Cascadia Development, JV Prime. JV, I muttered. Julian Vance. He lacked even the imagination to hide his initials. I pulled up the property portfolio. Julian had been boasting about expanding into residential development, a sector I had always avoided. He claimed we had broken ground on 3 major luxury complexes in Arizona and Nevada. I found the project files. Project Phoenix, Project Mirage. I cross-referenced the addresses with satellite imaging and municipal tax records. My stomach turned over, not from the poison this time, but from the sheer hollow reality of it. Project Phoenix was a patch of barren desert near Scottsdale. No foundation, no steel, just dust and cactus. Project Mirage was an empty parking lot in Las Vegas. He had fabricated entire construction projects. He had forged architectural drawings, faked permits, and created false invoices for millions of dollars in materials concrete that was never poured steel, that was never smelted. He was billing the company for ghost buildings. He hollowed it out, I said aloud. He hollowed out the company. Martha returned with a glass of tap water. She set it down and leaned over my shoulder, her eyes scanning the columns of red numbers. How bad is it? Catastrophic, I said, pointing at the screen. He has embezzled nearly $22 million in the last 18 months. The company is not solvent, Martha. If the auditors looked closely, the whole thing would collapse. We are operating on vapor. Where did the money go? She asked. He has expensive taste, but he cannot spend $22 million on suits and cars. That is what I need to find. I followed the trail of the ghost money. It did not go to a savings account. It went to an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands, and from there it vanished into a high-risk currency exchange. I dug deeper, accessing his corporate email. I knew it was a violation of privacy. I did not care. He had violated the sanctity of my life. I could violate his inbox. I found a folder marked Personal, Urgent. It contained a chain of emails from a sender identified only as K. The tone of the emails started professional 6 months ago, but rapidly descended into threats. January 4th. Mr. Vance, the margin call is due. Please remit $2 million. February 10th. You are over-leveraged, Julian. We need coverage. March 15th. The principal is losing patience. Your debt is now $12 million with interest. Last week, Mr. Vance, you have run out of extensions. The syndicate requires full repayment of $38 million by Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. Failure to pay will result in the liquidation of assets. And by assets, we mean you. I stared at the number. $38 million. And the transfer I had seen on the tablet downstairs, the one triggered by my death certificate, was for $40 million. It was a perfect mathematical equation. Julian's debt, $38 million. Robert Vance's life insurance, plus the trust payout, $40 million. Net profit for Julian, $2 million and a clean slate. He was not just killing me for greed. He was killing me to balance his ledger. I was nothing more than a line item to him, a liability that could be converted into an asset. He is terrified, Martha whispered, reading the emails over my shoulder. These people, this syndicate, they are going to kill him. So he decided to trade my life for his, I said. My voice was devoid of emotion. I felt like I was looking at a snapped cable on a suspension bridge. It was tragic, yes, but mostly it was just physics. Force A exceeded the capacity of material B. Julian's fear exceeded his morality. I closed the email and leaned back the leather chair, groaning. A memory surfaced, unbidden and sharp as a shard of glass. 6 months ago, Sunday dinner. Julian had come over early, which was unusual. He had brought a bottle of wine and sat with me in this very office. "Dad," he had said, swirling his glass. I was looking over the estate planning. Just for tax purposes, you understand. The family trust. Does it have a clause for immediate disbursement in case of, God forbid, an unexpected tragedy? I had smiled at him. I had been touched by his prudence. Yes, son, I had told him. It is designed to bypass probate. Immediate liquidity to protect the company. Why do you ask? Just want to make sure you are protected, he had said. And then he had hugged me. I remembered that hug now. I remembered feeling his hands patting my back. At the time, I thought he was embracing his father. Now I realized he was checking the structural integrity of the container. He was calculating how much force it would take to break me. And the safe. 3 months ago. He had come into the office while I was opening the wall safe to retrieve a contract. You know, Dad, he had said casually, you really should write down that combination for Mom. Or for me. Just in case you forget. You are getting older. I never forget a number, I had replied. But what if you are incapacitated? He had pressed. We would be locked out of the critical files. I had given him the code. 1958, the year I was born. I gave him the code because I trusted him. I gave him the key to the vault, and he used it to steal the blueprints of my demise. He has been planning this for half a year, I said, the realization settling in my chest like wet concrete. The vitamins, the sudden interest in my health, the checkups, where he asked if I felt dizzy or tired. He was not monitoring my health, Martha. He was calibrating the dosage. He was testing the poison, seeing how much my heart could take before it gave out. He was weakening the foundation, Martha said. Her voice was hard, but tears were streaming down her face. He was chipping away at the concrete so that when he finally pushed, you would fall. And tonight is the push, I said. I looked at the time on the computer screen. 8:15 in the evening. Downstairs, the party was in full swing. Julian was probably on stage right now, looking at his watch, wondering why his father had not yet collapsed. He was probably making a charming excuse for my absence, telling the guests I was overwhelmed by emotion. He needs that death certificate, I repeated. Without it, the $40 million does not transfer. The syndicate kills him on Sunday. So we have leverage, Martha said. We have more than leverage, I said. We have the truth. I looked at the financial data on the screen. The ghost projects, the offshore accounts, the emails from the loan sharks. This was the autopsy of my son's character. It was ugly, rotting, and beyond repair. I reached for the mouse and began to export the files. I saved everything to an encrypted external drive. Every email, every bank transfer, every fake invoice. What are you doing? Martha asked. Preserving the evidence, I said. If I die tonight, this drive goes to the FBI. I set up a dead man's switch years ago for the corporate server. If I do not log in every 48 hours, certain files are automatically emailed to my attorney. I am adding these files to the payload. You are not going to die tonight, Martha said fiercely. I might, I said honestly. My heart feels like it is fluttering in a cage. I do not know what he gave me or how much. But if I go down, I am taking his lies with me. I finished the transfer and pulled the small silver drive from the USB port. I held it up. It was so small, yet it contained the destruction of my family name. Martha, I said, turning to face her, you need to understand what this means. If we use this, Julian is gone. Not just from the company, from our lives. He goes to prison for decades. The Vance name will be destroyed. The company will likely go bankrupt. Martha looked at me. She wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. Her expression hardened into the stone-cold mask of the prosecutor she used to be. Robert, she said. The boy we raised died a long time ago. The man downstairs. The man who put poison in your whiskey and drafted your obituary while you were still breathing. He is not your son. He is a predator. She pointed at the computer screen at the sum of $40 million. Tonight, she said, her voice shaking with rage. You are not his father. You are an ATM that needs to be smashed open so he can get his cash. And I will be damned if I let him spend a single cent of your life. I nodded. She was right. The emotional load was heavy crushing, but the logic was undeniable. The structure had failed. The only option left was controlled demolition. Okay, I said. We have the evidence of the motive. Now we need the evidence of the crime. I stood up. The room spun violently, and I had to grip the desk to keep from falling. The poison was working faster now. My time was running out. We need to get him to admit it, I said. We need him to say it aloud. We need him to confess that he poisoned me. How? Martha asked. He will deny everything. Not if he thinks he has won, I said. Hubris is his weakness. It always has been. He wants to be the smartest man in the room. If he thinks I am dying, if he thinks he is watching the final collapse, he will want to take credit for the demolition. I looked at the security monitors on the wall. One of them showed the ballroom. I could see Julian near the stage checking his phone, looking agitated. He was searching for us. We go to the plan, I said. The blueprint. Are you sure you can do this? Martha asked, looking at my gray skin. I built a skyscraper on a fault line, I said, straightening my tie with trembling fingers. I can handle a little turbulence. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket. Let us go teach our son a lesson about gravity, I said. What goes up must come down. Before we left the sanctuary of the penthouse office, I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out the small amber bottle Julian had given me earlier. The label looked perfect. It had my name, the pharmacy logo, the dosage instructions, digoxin, 0.125 milligrams, take 1 tablet daily. It even had the little warning sticker about dizziness that I had seen 100 times. But I am an engineer. I do not trust labels. I trust serial numbers. I pulled out my reading glasses and held the bottle under the harsh light of the desk lamp. My hands were still shaking a tremor that seemed to vibrate in my very bones, but my eyes focused with laser precision. I looked at the batch number printed on the side of the label, Lot 4829-B. Then I remembered the receipt I had filed in my desk drawer just 2 days ago when I picked up my refill. I am a creature of habit. I file everything. I opened the drawer and found the receipt. Lot 9931-X. They did not match. I poured one of the pills into my palm. To the naked eye, it was just a white round tablet identical to my heart medication. But when I held it up to the light, I saw the texture was slightly different, chalkier, less compressed. And there was no imprint code. Genuine pharmaceuticals always have an imprint code. It is a counterfeit, I said, my voice cold. He did not just swap the pills. He made them, or had them made. Can we prove what is in it? Martha asked, her voice tight with urgency. Not without a lab, I said, but we can get close. Martha pulled out her phone. She did not dial 911. She dialed a number she knew by heart. Dr. Eris Thorne, she said to me as the phone rang. Forensic toxicologist. He owes me a favor from the relentless defense I gave his brother 5 years ago. She spoke rapidly into the phone, her voice dropping to a murmur. Iris, it is Martha Vance. I need you at the service entrance of the Vance Tower in 20 minutes. No, do not ask questions. Bring a field test kit for cardiac stimulants and heavy metals. Yes, it is life or death. Do not use the main lobby. I will have security override the back door. 20 minutes, Eris. She hung up and looked at me. He is coming. But we need to buy time. If Julian realizes we are gone, he will come looking. If he finds us up here, he will know the game is up, and he might do something desperate. We have to go back down. Go back down. I looked at her as if she were insane. Martha, he is trying to kill me. You want me to walk back into the lion's den? We have to, she said firmly. We need to act normal. We need to play the part until Aris gets here and we can confirm the poison. If we panic now, we lose control of the situation. You are Robert Vance. You have stared down union strikes and city inspectors. You can stare down your son for 20 minutes. She was right. Of course she was right. We took the service elevator down this time, overriding the logs, so it would not show our movement. When the doors opened on the ballroom floor, the wall of sound hit me laughter, clinking glasses, the swell of the orchestra. It felt surreal. I was walking into my own wake. We slipped back into the crowd near the kitchen entrance. I straightened my jacket and forced a smile onto my face. It felt like wearing a mask made of lead. "Dad." The voice came from behind me, cheerful and bright. I felt a hand land heavily on my shoulder. I flinched. It was a visceral reaction, my body recoiling from the touch of the predator. I turned slowly. Julian was standing there, beaming. He looked handsome, successful, and utterly devoid of conscience. "I was looking for you," he said, his eyes scanning my face, searching for signs of weakness. "Where did you go?" "The investors are asking for you." "Just needed some air, son," I said. My voice sounded surprisingly steady, anchored by the sheer weight of my hatred. The excitement, it is a lot for an old man. Julian squeezed my shoulder. Squeeze. It wasn't affection. It was a structural test. He was checking for tremors. He was checking for the cold sweat of cardiac distress. "You feel a bit tense," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Are you feeling okay? Any dizziness?" "A little," I lied, leaning into the role. "My chest feels tight." A flicker of satisfaction crossed his face so fast that if I hadn't been looking for it, I would have missed it. It was the look of a demolition expert watching the first charge detonate perfectly. "That is normal," he said soothingly. "Just take it easy. We will get through the speeches, and then you can go home and rest. Forever." He didn't say forever. He said, "and then you can rest." But I heard the subtext. It screamed in the space between his words. "Come on," he said, guiding me toward the stage. "It is time. Everyone is waiting." He led me through the crowd like a prize show dog. People patted my back, shook my hand. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that the man guiding me was my executioner. But I held my tongue. I needed the proof. I needed Aris Thorne to tell me exactly what chemical was currently coursing through my veins, weakening my heart valve by valve. We reached the stage. The lights were blinding. Julian stepped up to the microphone, tapping it twice. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian announced, his voice booming with charisma. "If I could have your attention, tonight is not just about a building, it is about a man. My father. Robert Vance." Applause erupted. I stood next to him, waving mechanically. "My father taught me everything I know," Julian continued, turning to look at me with adoring eyes. "He taught me that a foundation must be strong. He taught me that you have to make sacrifices to build something great." "Sacrifices," I thought. "Like your father's life for your gambling debts." "So I want to propose a toast," Julian said. He signaled to a waiter who appeared instantly with a tray. On it was a single glass of whiskey, the same vintage Macallan. "To Robert Vance," Julian said, handing me the glass. "To the man who built the sky." The room raised their glasses. "To Robert Vance." I held the glass. The amber liquid swirled. This was the second dose, the finisher. The first dose in the pills weakened the heart. This one, likely spiked with a high concentration of potassium or digitalis, would stop it. I looked at the glass. I looked at Julian. "Drink up, Dad," he whispered off mic. "It is the good stuff." I raised the glass to my lips. I could smell the peat, but underneath it, my heightened senses detected a faint acrid odor. Bitter almonds. No, that was cyanide. This smelled metallic. Like copper. My hand shook. This time I didn't have to fake it. The terror was real. She will be fine. And so will you. In a few minutes. He thought the poison was inside me. He thought the clock had started. Why don't we sit down? Julian suggested, guiding me to a chair center stage. I have prepared a video montage of your career. I sat. The lights dimmed. The screen behind us flickered to life, showing grainy footage of me as a young man in a hard hat. As the room watched the video, I leaned back, closing my eyes. I focused on my breathing. I had not drunk the whiskey, but the pills from earlier were still in my system. I could feel my pulse racing 120 beats per minute, then dropping to 50, then racing again. My heart was confused. It was receiving conflicting signals. I needed the antidote. I needed a hospital. But first, I needed Eris. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A single vibration. I checked it under the cover of the darkness. A text from Martha Package delivered. Loading dock B, 5 minutes. I looked at Julian. He was watching the screen rapt. He was watching the history of the man he was about to erase. Julian, I whispered, leaning over. I need the restroom. The whiskey. It went right through me. He glanced at me. In the dim light, my pallor must have looked ghostly. Can you hold it? He asked. The video is only 5 minutes. No, I groaned, clutching my stomach. Now, please. He hesitated. He didn't want me to leave the stage. He wanted me to die right here in the spotlight during the montage of my triumphs. Poetic justice in his sick mind. But he also didn't want his father to soil himself on stage. That would ruin the dignity of the obituary. Okay, he said, annoyed. Quickly, use the private one backstage. Help me up, I said weakly. He hauled me to my feet. I leaned heavily on him, letting him feel my dead weight. You are burning up, he noted, touching my forehead. I feel cold, I whispered. He led me to the wings of the stage. Go, he said. Hurry back. The finale is coming up. I stumbled into the backstage corridor. As soon as I was out of his sight, I straightened up. I moved as fast as my trembling legs would carry me, not to the restroom, but to the service elevator, where Martha was already waiting, holding the door open. Did you drink it? She asked as I collapsed against the elevator wall. The plant enjoyed it, I said. Let us go see what my son tried to feed me. The elevator descended to the loading dock. The doors opened to the cool, damp night air of Seattle. A black van was waiting. A man in a trench coat stood by the open rear doors, holding a silver case. Dr. Eris Thorne. Martha, he said, his face grave. You sounded like you were in a war zone. We are, she said. She reached into my pocket and pulled out the counterfeit pill bottle. Test this. Now. Eris opened his case. It was a portable lab gleaming with vials and digital readers. He took one of the pills, crushed it, and dissolved it in a reagent solution. He placed a drop on a digital spectrometer slide. We waited. The seconds ticked by like hours. The machine beeped. Eris looked at the readout. His eyes widened. Robert, he said, looking at me with professional horror. How many of these did you take? 2, I said. About 40 minutes ago. You need to get to an ER, Eris said. This isn't digoxin. It's a compound of ephedrine and concentrated digitalis purpura. Foxglove. Foxglove, I repeated. A heart stimulant. In this dosage, Eris shook his head. It causes ventricular fibrillation. It mimics a massive heart attack. It makes the heart beat so fast it just gives up. 2 pills is dangerous. If you had taken a third or combined it with alcohol, I would be dead, I finished. You have maybe an hour before the peak absorption hits, Eris said. I can give you a beta blocker now to slow your heart rate, but you need dialysis to get this out of your blood. Give me the beta blocker, I said, rolling up my sleeve. Robert, no, Martha argued. We go to the hospital now. No, I said. If we leave now, he wins. He gets away with it. He claims it was natural causes. I need him to confess. I need it on tape. You are gambling with your life, Martha cried. I am calculating the risk, I said. Aris, give me the shot. Just enough to keep me standing for 20 minutes. Aris looked at Martha. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face again. He injected the beta blocker into my arm. The cool liquid burned as it entered my vein. Almost instantly, the frantic fluttering in my chest began to slow. The dizziness receded slightly. Thank you, I said, adjusting my cuff. I am keeping the pills, Aris said, sealing the bottle in an evidence bag. And I will have the full report ready for the police in an hour. Good, I said. I turned to Martha. Now we go back upstairs, and we execute the blueprint. He will be suspicious, Martha said. You have been gone too long. That is part of the plan, I said. I am not going back to the stage. I am going to the VIP lounge. We lure him there. Just the three of us. I looked up at the towering skyscraper above me. My name was on the building. Tonight I would make sure my name meant something. Not just steel and glass, but justice. Let us go, I said. I have a party to finish. The elevator ride back up to the VIP level was the longest vertical commute of my life, yet it lasted only 45 seconds. In that steel box, Martha and I were no longer husband and wife, we were co-conspirators in a coup. The beta blocker Aris had injected into my vein was doing its work. The frantic fluttering in my chest had smoothed out into a steady, albeit artificially slow rhythm. My head was clearing. The fog of the poison was lifting, replaced by a clarity that was sharp enough to cut glass. The blueprint, I said, breaking the silence. It was a phrase I used in business when a project went critical. It meant we stopped improvising and started executing a rigid, unyielding plan. We need to understand the terrain. Julian thinks he controls the environment because he hires the security guards. He forgets that I designed the walls they stand behind. I raised my left wrist, tapping the screen of my smartwatch. It was a customized interface linked directly to the building management system. Julian had access to the BMS, of course, but only the user level. He could adjust the temperature, unlock doors, and view security feeds. He did not have root access. I did. I was the root. What are you doing? Martha asked, watching the digital readout on my wrist. I am turning the building into a witness, I replied. I navigated to the structural health monitoring menu. This was a subsystem designed to listen to the skeleton of the tower. It used thousands of piezoelectric sensors embedded in the concrete and steel to detect microfractures, wind stress, and seismic shifts. These sensors were sensitive enough to pick up the vibration of a human footstep on a concrete slab from 3 floors away. The VIP lounge, I explained, my voice low. Julian will want privacy. He will take me there because he thinks it is a dead zone. He knows the security cameras in there can be disabled with a switch on the wall. He has used it before for his illicit meetings. He thinks when that light goes red, no one is watching. But, Martha prompted. But the structural sensors never sleep, I said. I am recalibrating the acoustic sensitivity of the strain gauges in the VIP lounge walls. I am turning them into high-fidelity microphones. They will record every vibration in the air, every breath, every word. I tapped execute. The watch pulsed once. Emergency recording protocol alpha active. I read the confirmation. The data will bypass the local server, which Julian can wipe and stream directly to the black box in the basement foundation. It is write-only memory. Once recorded, it cannot be deleted, only read by a court order. He will confess, Martha said, her voice steel. He is arrogant. If he thinks you are dying, he will want to gloat. He will want you to know he won. That is the psychological load, I agreed. We apply pressure until he cracks. The elevator chimed. We were back on the penthouse level. The VIP lounge was a secluded area separate from the main ballroom, reserved for high-stakes negotiations and tonight a murder. We stepped out. The air here was quieter, filtered, smelling of expensive leather and old money. Julian was pacing near the bar, checking his phone. When he saw us, his head snapped up. Relief washed over his face, followed instantly by a mask of concern. It was a terrifying transformation to watch. "Dad," he rushed over. "I was about to send security to sweep the building. You disappeared." "I told you," I said, injecting a tremor into my voice. I leaned heavily on Martha, letting my legs buckle slightly. "The stomach. The chest. It is getting worse." Julian scanned my face. The beta blocker kept my color relatively normal, but I deliberately slackened my jaw, letting my eyelids droop. "You need to sit down," Julian said. "Here, the lounge is empty." He guided us toward the seating area. A bottle of water and 3 glasses sat on a low table. Julian reached for the bottle immediately. "You are dehydrated," he said. "The alcohol, the stress. You need to flush your system. Dr. Evans always says hydration is key for your heart." He poured a glass of water. His back was to us for a fraction of a second, just enough time for him to slip something in. No, he was too exposed. But he handed me the glass with an insistence that set my alarms ringing. "Drink this," he commanded gently. "All of it." I took the glass. The water looked clear. But in my world, clear did not mean clean. "I cannot hold it." I rasped my hand, shaking violently. I let the water slosh over the rim, spilling onto my knuckles. "Let me help him," Martha said. She stepped in, taking the glass from my hand. "Julian, get a napkin. He is making a mess." "It is just water, Mom," Julian said, annoyed, but he turned to grab a cocktail napkin from the bar. In that singular second, Martha moved with the dexterity of a magician. She had palmed a glass of water from a nearby service tray as we entered. I hadn't even seen her do it. With a seamless motion, she set Julian's glass on the side table behind a vase and replaced it with her own. Julian turned back. Martha was holding the new glass to my lips. "Sip slowly, Robert," she cooed. I took a sip. It was cool, clean water, safe, but I reacted as if I were swallowing gravel. I coughed, spluttering, pushing the glass away. "It tastes bitter," I groaned. Julian watched me, his eyes narrowing. He looked at the glass in Martha's hand, then at the table. He saw nothing amiss. The switch had been perfect. "It is your taste buds, Dad," Julian said, his voice tightening. "It is a symptom of the stroke, or the attack. You need to finish it." He wanted to make sure. He wanted to dilute the poison already in my system to speed up absorption, or perhaps he just wanted to feel in control of my intake. "I cannot," I gasped. I clutched my chest, digging my fingers into my shirt. The pain. It is like a vice. I allowed myself to slide down the sofa, my head lolling back against the cushions. I focused on the ceiling where I knew the acoustic dampening panels hid the sensors I had just activated. "Call 911, Martha demanded, playing her part. She grabbed her phone. "No." Julian lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. "No ambulances. Not yet. Think about the stock price, Mom. If the paramedics haul him out on a stretcher in front of the press, Apex stock opens at 0 on Monday. We handle this quietly. We have a private doctor on call." "He is dying," Martha screamed at him. "He is stabilizing," Julian lied. He looked at me, his eyes searching for the life draining out of me. "Dad, look at me. Just breathe. We will take you into the private suite, the back room. It is quieter there. You can lie down." The private suite. The inner sanctum of the VIP lounge. Soundproofed. Windowless. The perfect kill box. "Yes," I whispered, barely audible. "Too loud. Here. The lights. Too bright." "See," Julian said to Martha. "He wants to go to the suite. Help me move him." Julian grabbed my arm. His grip was clammy. He hauled me up. I was a big man, over 6 feet, but I made myself dead weight. He grunted with the effort. "You are heavy, old man," he muttered under his breath. We shuffled toward the heavy mahogany doors at the back of the lounge. Julian used his keycard to unlock them. We stepped inside. The room was oppressive. Dark wood paneling, heavy velvet curtains, a single low chandelier. As soon as we were inside, Julian let go of me. I collapsed onto a leather Chesterfield sofa, sprawling awkwardly. Julian turned and locked the door. Then he walked to the wall and flipped a switch. The red light above the door illuminated. Privacy mode engaged. "There," Julian said. "No cameras. No interruptions." He did not know he had just locked himself inside a recording studio. He walked over to the small wet bar in the corner and poured himself a drink. Vodka. Neat. He downed it in one gulp. He did not offer me any. He did not offer Martha any. He stood with his back to us, his shoulders rising and falling. "Julian," Martha said, her voice trembling. "He is turning blue. We need help." Julian turned around. The mask was gone. There was no concern in his face anymore. No panic. There was only a profound, exhausted relief and a chilling kind of curiosity. He looked at me like a kid looking at a bug he had just crushed, waiting to see if its legs would stop twitching. "We do not need help, Mom," Julian said softly. "We need to wait." "Wait for what?" Martha asked, stepping back, putting herself between me and him. "For nature to take its course," Julian said. He walked closer, swirling the ice in his empty glass. "It is peaceful, isn't it? Better than a hospital. Better than tubes and wires." You are talking like he is already dead," Martha whispered. "He is," Julian said. He looked directly at me. I kept my eyes half closed, my breathing shallow and ragged. "Aren't you, Dad? You can feel it, can't you? The walls closing in." I let out a long, wheezing breath. "Julian." "Why?" He laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a sound. "Why you ask me why you have been suffocating me for 10 years, Dad?" Julian checked the load. "Julian, the margin is too tight." "Julian, that is not how we build a legacy." "You never let me breathe. You built this company, yes, but you built a cage around me. So you kill me," I wheezed. "For freedom. For survival," Julian snapped. He slammed his glass down on the coffee table. The sound would register perfectly on the sensors. "I am in a hole, Dad. A $38 million hole. And you are sitting on a trust fund that only opens when you close your eyes. It is just math. You taught me that. Cold, hard math." "The poison," I whispered. "The vitamins?" Julian smiled. It was the smile of a man who thought he had committed the perfect crime. "Foxglove," he said. "Digitalis. Old school. Elegant. It looks just like heart failure. The coroner will see your history of atrial fibrillation. He will see the stress of the opening night, and he will sign the paper. Natural causes. And by Monday the transfer clears, and I am the CEO who tragically lost his father, but saved the company." I felt a surge of triumph so potent it nearly broke my act. He said it. He named the poison. He named the motive. He named the method. But I needed more. I needed him to admit to the forgery. I needed him to admit he was alone in this, or if he had help. Rebecca," I stammered. "Did she help?" Julian scoffed. "Rebecca. My wife thinks I am a genius. She thinks I am trading crypto. No, Dad. This is me. All me. I found the chemist. I bought the precursors. I pressed the pills in the basement of the rental property in Bellevue. I built this, Dad. Just like you built this tower. I engineered your exit." He leaned over me, his face inches from mine. I could smell the vodka on his breath. "You should be proud," he whispered. "You raised a killer. That takes a certain kind of strength, doesn't it?" I looked into his eyes. I saw the hollowness there. I saw the rot. And I knew it was time to drop the curtain. I stopped wheezing. I took a deep, steady breath, filling my lungs completely. I opened my eyes fully. The haze was gone. The beta blocker had done its job, and my adrenaline had done the rest. I stared at him with the cold, hard gaze of a man who has fired 1,000 incompetent contractors. "Julian," I said. My voice was no longer a raspy whisper. It was the deep, resonant baritone that had commanded boardrooms for 4 decades. Julian blinked. He pulled back, slightly confused by the sudden change in tone. "What?" he said. I sat up. I did not struggle. I did not shake. I sat up straight, brushing the imaginary dust off my lapel. "I said," I repeated, my voice booming in the small room, "your calculations are off." Julian stumbled back, hitting the coffee table. "Dad, how are you?" "Structural failure," I said, standing up. I towered over him. "It usually happens when the architect ignores the foundation. You ignored the foundation, son. You forgot who I am." "But the pills." Julian stammered, his eyes darting to the glass of water, then to me. "You took them. I watched you. You watched what I wanted you to see," I said. "Just like you thought you were in a private room." I tapped my watch. "End recording," I said clearly. The watch beeped. "Upload complete," the automated voice announced. Julian stared at the watch. His face went the color of ash. "What is that? What did you do?" "I just sent a high-definition audio file of your entire confession to the secure cloud server," I said. "And to my lawyer, and to the district attorney's personal inbox." "No," Julian whispered. "No, you can't. This room, it is shielded." "Shielded from cameras," I corrected him. "Not from the building itself. I am the building, Julian. Every bolt, every beam, every sensor." Martha stepped forward. She was no longer the weeping mother. She was the prosecutor. "You have the right to remain silent, Julian," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "But as your mother and your legal counsel, I would advise you to start running, because the police are already in the lobby." Julian looked at the door. He looked at us. The realization crashed over him. The dead load had just shifted. The building was not falling on me. It was falling on him. "You set me up," he screamed. "You tricked me." "I tested you," I said. "And you failed." Julian's eyes darted around the room, wild and desperate. He looked at the heavy crystal decanter on the bar. He looked at me. I saw the muscles in his legs coil. He was realizing that words wouldn't save him anymore. "I am not going to prison," he snarled. He lunged. Not for the door. For me. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut, and the magnetic lock engaged with a thud that felt final. We were inside the private suite, a windowless soundproofed box designed for billion-dollar handshakes, now repurposed as a death chamber. The silence was immediate and oppressive, swallowing the distant hum of the party outside. I allowed my legs to buckle completely. This was not entirely acting. The residue of the beta blocker and the lingering effects of the poison combined with the sheer adrenaline of the night made gravity feel twice as heavy. I collapsed onto the leather Chesterfield sofa, clutching my chest, letting out a ragged, whistling breath that rattled in my throat. "Water," I gasped, reaching a trembling hand toward the wet bar. "Julian, please." Julian stood by the door for a moment, his hand still on the lock, ensuring the red privacy light was illuminated. He turned slowly. The concern he had worn like a mask in the hallway had vanished, replaced by a chilling clinical detachment. He walked to the bar, poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher, and walked over to where I lay. He stood over me, the glass hovering just out of my reach. The condensation on the glass caught the low light of the chandelier. I reached for it, my fingers splayed and desperate. "Please," I wheezed, my throat burning. Julian tilted the glass. I opened my mouth, expecting relief. He poured the water onto the carpet beside my head. The sound of the liquid hitting the expensive wool rug was soft, a wet slap that echoed the slap of betrayal. I watched the dark stains spread inches from my face. I looked up at him, letting shock and betrayal flood my expression. "Why?" I whispered. Son. Julian took a step back, setting the empty glass on the coffee table with a deliberate, gentle click. He smoothed his suit jacket, checking his reflection in the dark mirror above the fireplace. "Do not call me that," he said, his voice conversational, as if discussing the weather. "It makes this harder than it needs to be. And honestly, Dad, you are making a mess. Try to die with some dignity. It is the last thing you can do for the company." "The company?" I managed to say, pushing myself up on one elbow before collapsing back down. "I built the company." "Exactly," Julian said. He began to pace the small room, his shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. "You built it. You defined it. You are it. And that is the problem. Apex Structural Solutions is Robert Vance. There is no room for anyone else, especially not me." He stopped and looked down at me, his face twisted in a sneer that looked alien on his handsome features. "You say you want me to take over," he continued, his voice rising slightly. "But you never actually let go of the wheel, do you?" Julian double-checked the load calculations. "Julian, do not sign that contract without my review. I am 35 years old, Dad. I am the CFO. But to you, I am just the intern carrying your briefcase. I was teaching you," I groaned. "Protecting you." "You were suffocating me," Julian shouted. The sound bounced off the soundproof walls. "You cast a shadow so big that nothing else can grow in it. The board looks at me and sees Robert's kid. The investors look at me and ask, 'What does your father think?' I am sick of it. The company needs new blood. It needs vision, not just concrete and steel. It needs risk. It needs life." "So you kill me?" I asked, letting my voice break. "For recognition. For survival," Julian corrected. He walked to the bar and poured himself a drink, vodka neat. He swirled it, looking at the vortex in the glass. "And yes, for the money. Let us not pretend that is not a factor." "The money," I repeated. 40 million? Julian froze. He turned slowly to face me. "You know, I saw the transfer." I lied, knowing the recording needed context. "On the tablet." Julian chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Ah, mother's doing, I assume. She always was snooping. Well, it does not matter now. Yes, $40 million. It cleans the slate. It pays the debts." "Debts?" I asked. "Gambling. Investments." Julian spat. "Crypto. Leverage. High-risk futures. I was trying to build something of my own, Dad. Something you did not touch. Something with my name on it. But the market, it turned. I lost 700,000 in a week. Then I tried to win it back. I borrowed. I borrowed from people who do not use banks. People who break legs." He took a long drink, his hand shaking slightly. "I owe $1.1 million just in interest." He confessed, the words spilling out now that the dam had broken. "They told me they would kill me, Dad. They sent me photos of Rebecca walking to her car. They sent me photos of you. They said if I did not pay by Monday, they would liquidate the Vance family. Literally." "So you chose me," I whispered. "It was the only way," Julian said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Your life insurance, the trust. It is the only liquidity we have. I embezzled 400,000 just to keep them off my back last month, but it wasn't enough. They want the principal. They want it all." "You stole from the company," I said, ensuring the word "stole" was clear for the microphone hidden in the ceiling. "I borrowed," Julian screamed. "I was going to pay it back once I had control. Once you were gone, and I could sell the Arizona land assets without you asking questions about soil samples." He walked over and knelt beside the sofa. He looked into my eyes, and for a second I saw the terrified boy he used to be. But then the greed washed over it. "It is a sacrifice, Dad," he said softly. "You always talk about sacrifice. We pour the concrete so others can stand tall. Well, this is your final pour. You die, and I live. The legacy continues. Isn't that what you wanted? I closed my eyes, feigning a spasm of pain. The pills, I gasped. For months. I felt weak. It took a while to get the dosage right, Julian admitted, rocking back on his heels. He sounded proud, like an engineer explaining a complex solution. Derek Brooks. You remember him, Rebecca's brother, the chemist. He synthesized it for me, a compound of digitalis and ephedrine. Hard to trace. It mimics natural heart failure perfectly. You poisoned me. Every morning. Every morning, Julian said. Every time I handed you that bottle, I was saving my own life. Health is wealth, Dad. Remember, and tonight, the whiskey. That was the accelerator, the final push to stop the engine. But I didn't drink the whiskey, I murmured, watching his reaction. You drank enough, Julian said confidently. I saw you sip it. Plus the pills from earlier are peaking right now. Your heart is firing at 200 beats per minute. It is just a flutter now. Soon it will just stop. He stood up and checked his watch. Any minute now, he said. The paramedics are on standby, but I sent them to the wrong entrance. By the time they get here, you will be cold. Tragic loss. Sudden cardiac arrest. I have the press release ready to go. I lay there listening to my son outline the architecture of my murder. Every word was a brick in his prison cell. The sensors in the walls were picking up every syllable, streaming it to the black box in the foundation. And Rebecca, I asked. Does she... No, she knows enough, Julian said, turning his back to me to pour another drink. She knows we are in trouble. She knows accidents happen. She knows how to wear black and cry on cue. She is a good wife. He took a sip, relaxing now. He thought the hard part was over. He thought he was just waiting for the dust to settle. I gave you everything, I whispered, putting all the heartbreak of a father into the voice of a dying man. You gave me a cage, Julian said without turning around. Now I am breaking out. The room was silent for a moment, save for the clink of ice in his glass. Julian, I said. My voice was different now, stronger. The acting was over. He did not turn immediately. Save your breath, Dad. Let go. I am not the one who needs to let go, I said. I sat up. The leather of the sofa creaked loudly. I placed my feet on the floor and pushed myself up to a sitting position. I adjusted my tie, which had gone askew during my performance. Julian turned around slowly. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. He squinted at me, trying to process what he was seeing. I was not clutching my chest. I was not gasping. I was sitting upright, my posture rigid, my eyes clear and cold. Dad, he stammered. Why are you sitting up? You should be dead. I finished the sentence for him. Calculated failure. That is what we call it in the industry, when the theoretical model does not match the reality. But the poison, Julian said, his voice rising in pitch. I watched you. For months. Tonight. You are sick. You are dying. I was, I said calmly, until I found the cracks in your design. I reached for the glass of water he had poured on the floor, picked up the empty tumbler and set it back on the tray. You forgot the variables, Julian, I said, my voice echoing in the small room. Variable 1. Martha Vance does not miss a trick. Variable 2. I check the batch numbers on my medication. And variable 3? I tapped the face of my smartwatch. It glowed in the dim light. Variable 3. You never check the acoustics of a room before you confess to murder. What? Julian stepped back, his back hitting the bar. What is that? Emergency override protocol, I said. System-wide audio recording. Active since we walked in. Every word you just said. The debt, the crypto, the digitalis, the chemist, the plan to delay the paramedics. It is all in the cloud. It is with my lawyer. It is with the district attorney. Julian's face went white. The blood drained out of him so fast, he looked like the corpse he intended me to be. No, he whispered. No. That is illegal. You can't. This is entrapment. This is security, I said, standing up. I felt a wave of dizziness, but I locked my knees and stood tall. And you just triggered the alarm. Give me the watch, Julian hissed. He dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, shards of crystal exploding outward. It is too late, I said. The data is already sent. Deleting it from the watch won't save you. I said, give me the watch, Julian screamed. The mask was fully off now. He was a cornered animal. The fear of the syndicate, the fear of prison, the fear of failure, it all coalesced into a violent rage. It is over, Julian, I said, staring him down. The foundation has crumbled. Get out of the building before the police get here. The police aren't here, Julian snarled. His eyes darted to the heavy brass lamp on the side table. We are alone. Locked in. Soundproof. He grabbed the lamp. He ripped the cord from the socket. You want a heart attack? He screamed, swinging the lamp like a club. I'll give you a heart attack, he lunged. The brass lamp crashed down, but it did not hit my skull. In my 68 years, I have dodged falling rivets, swinging steel beams, and hostile board members. I might be old, and I might be poisoned, but instinct is the last thing to fade. I rolled off the leather sofa, just as the heavy base of the lamp decimated the cushion where my head had been a fraction of a second earlier. The sound was a dull, heavy thud, followed by the tearing of expensive fabric. I hit the floor hard. My shoulders screamed in protest, and the world spun in a sickening gray vortex. The beta blocker was fighting the poison, but the physical exertion was draining my reserves rapidly. I lay there face pressed against the wool carpet and made a split-second tactical decision. I stopped moving. I let my body go limp. I slowed my breathing until it was shallow and imperceptible. If I fought him physically, I might lose. He was 35, desperate and fueled by adrenaline. I was a dying man, holding on to consciousness by a thread. I needed him to believe he had succeeded. I needed him to lower his guard one last time to commit the final error. Dad, Julian's voice was ragged panic vibrating in the single syllable. I did not answer. I stared blankly at the leg of the coffee table, keeping my eyelids significantly lowered, just a slit of vision remaining. Dad. He kicked my leg. It was not a vicious kick, but a prod. A test. I let my leg move with the impact dead weight. Silence filled the room. I could hear his breathing fast, wet, terrified gasps. I heard the lamp thud onto the floor as he dropped it. He was pacing now. 3 steps left, 3 steps right. The vibrations traveled through the floorboards to my cheek. Okay, he muttered to himself. Okay. Heart attack. It was a heart attack. He got agitated. He fell. It is natural. It looks natural. He was rewriting the narrative in real time, convincing himself of the lie. Then the footsteps stopped. He was standing right over me. I could smell the vodka on his breath mixed with the metallic tang of fear. Sorry, Dad, he whispered, but you left me no choice. He knelt. I felt his hand reaching into his pocket. The rustle of fabric. Then the click of a plastic lid. He was pulling out the evidence. The counterfeit pill bottle. The one he had used to poison me for months. He intended to place it in my hand or near my body, a final touch, to frame the narrative perhaps, to suggest I had confused my dosage in my senility, or simply to ensure the police found the cause immediately and looked no further. He reached for my right hand, which lay splayed on the carpet. His fingers were cold and clammy as he wrapped my limp fingers around the plastic cylinder. Just hold this, he murmured, adjusting my grip. Make it look convincing. He leaned in close, his face inches from mine, checking my eyes to ensure the light had gone out. That was his mistake. He leaned into the collapse zone. I opened my eyes. Wide. The shock on his face was absolute. It was the look of a man seeing a ghost. For a microsecond, his brain could not process the input. The corpse was looking back at him. The corpse was angry. I did not let go of the bottle. Instead, my hand clamped around his wrist with a grip forged by 40 years of hauling rebar and crushing handshakes. "Your structure is weaker than I thought, son." My voice was not a whisper. It was a growl, low and resonant, scraping up from the bottom of my lungs. Julian shrieked a high, thin sound that had no dignity in it. He tried to yank his hand away, but I held fast. I used his own leverage against him, twisting his wrist while I pushed myself up with my other arm. "Let go!" he screamed, striking at my arm with his free hand. "Die! Why won't you just die?" "Because I have work to do," I gritted out. I released him, shoving him backward. He scrambled away on his hands and knees, crab-walking across the carpet until his back hit the wet bar. He grabbed a wine bottle by the neck, holding it like a club, his eyes wild and dilated. "Stay back," he yelled. "I will kill you. I swear to God, I will finish it." "You cannot finish what you do not understand," I said, rising to my feet. I swayed the room, tilting dangerously, but I locked my knees. I adjusted my suit jacket, buttoning it with deliberate, insulting slowness. "You thought this was a murder, Julian. It is an eviction." "I am getting out of here," he panted. He looked at the door. "I am leaving. And if you tell anyone I will tell them you attacked me. I will tell them you are senile." He lunged for the door, his hand slamming onto the handle. Boom. The heavy mahogany doors did not open. Instead, they exploded inward with a force that sent splinters flying across the room. Julian was thrown backward by the impact of the door swinging open. He crashed into the side of the sofa, the wine bottle flying from his hand and shattering against the wall. Martha Vance stood in the doorway. She looked magnificent. The grief and fear were gone, replaced by the righteous fury of a matriarch protecting her pride. Beside her stood Garrison, my head of private security, a man with shoulders like bridge abutments and a face carved from granite. And behind him were 3 men in plain clothes, but with the unmistakable posture of law enforcement badges clipped to their belts, hands resting on sidearms. "Police!" one of the officers shouted, stepping into the room. "Drop to your knees." "Now?" Julian scrambled up, looking between me, the police, and the open door. "Mom," he whimpered. "Mom, help me. He went crazy. He attacked me." Martha walked into the room. She did not look at Julian. She walked straight to me. She placed a hand on my arm, her touch grounding me, steadying my trembling frame. "Are you intact?" she asked quietly. "Structural damage, minor," I replied, looking at my son. "Foundation secured." Martha turned to Julian. Her eyes were like ice. "Do not call me Mom. You forfeited that right when you poured poison into your father's water." "It is a lie," Julian screamed, backing toward the far wall. "It is all a lie. They are setting me up. Officers, listen to me. He is senile. He is hallucinating." "Mr. Vance," the lead detective said, stepping forward. He was a gray-haired man. I recognized Detective Miller. Martha had made the call. "We have the audio. We heard everything from the van outside." "Audio." Julian looked around wildly. "What audio? This room is soundproof." "I told you, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. "I am the building." I pointed a shaking finger toward the ceiling, directly at the intricate plaster molding above the chandelier. "The camera," I said. "Microlens. High definition. Infrared. It is usually off. But tonight I gave it a special task. It has been live streaming to the police server for the last 10 minutes. Julian looked up. He stared at the molding. The realization hit him like a wrecking ball. The recording I had mentioned earlier was audio, yes, but the video showed him pouring the water on the floor. It showed him grabbing the lamp. It showed him trying to plant the pill bottle. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He looked at the open door blocked by Garrison and the police. He looked at the windowless walls. Panic, primal and irrational, took over. "I am not going to jail," he shrieked. He bolted. Not toward the door, but toward the service panel in the corner of the room. It was a maintenance access point for the HVAC system. He tore the wooden cover off the wall, revealing the steel ductwork. "Julian, stop!" I shouted. "It is a dead end." He didn't listen. He was clawing at the vent, his fingernails breaking against the metal, sobbing and screaming incoherently. "The syndicate," he gibbered. "They are coming Monday morning. I need the money. I need the money." "Secure him," Detective Miller ordered. Garrison moved. He didn't run. He didn't need to. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed Julian by the back of his expensive Italian suit. He hauled him away from the wall as if he were a rag doll. "Let me go," Julian thrashed, swinging his fists. "You do not understand. They will kill me. I have to pay them." Garrison spun him around and pinned him against the oak paneling. The detective stepped in, cuffs clicking metallic and final around Julian's wrists. "Julian Vance." The detective recited the words, sounding surreal in the luxurious room. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Robert Vance, conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement." Julian slumped against the wall. The fight went out of him as the cold steel touched his skin. He slid down to the floor, weeping. It was not the crying of a man sorry for his sins. It was the crying of a child who had been told playtime was over. "It wasn't my fault," he sobbed into his knees. "The market. The algorithm. It was supposed to go up. It wasn't my fault." I walked over to him. My legs felt like lead pipes, stiff and heavy. I looked down at the top of his head, the hair I used to ruffle when he was a boy. The head I had kissed 1,000 times. "It is never your fault, is it, Julian?" I said softly. "It is the market. It is the pressure. It is your father's shadow. You spent your whole life looking for shortcuts, trying to bypass the hard work. And when the load got too heavy, instead of reinforcing the column, you tried to blow up the building." He looked up at me. His face was a mask of snot and tears, red and swollen. "Dad," he whispered, "please, the syndicate. They will find me in prison. They have people inside. You have to help me. Pay them. Please, just pay them, and I will disappear. I will never come back." He was still bargaining. Even in handcuffs, sitting in the wreckage of his own life, he was trying to negotiate a deal. I looked at Martha. She was standing by the fireplace, her arms crossed, looking at the son she had birthed and raised. Her face was unreadable, a mask of tragedy carved in marble. She shook her head slowly. I looked back at Julian. "I cannot pay your debts anymore, son," I said. "You have overdrawn the account." "Dad," he screamed as the officers hauled him to his feet. "Daddy, don't let them take me." The use of the childhood name Daddy pierced me like a shard of glass. It was a calculated manipulation, I knew that. But it still drew blood. "Take him out the service elevator," I told the detective. "I do not want the guests to see him like this. Not for his sake, for the company's." "Understood, Mr. Vance," Miller said. "We have an ambulance waiting for you downstairs as well. You need to be checked out." "I am fine," I lied. "Just get him out of my sight." They dragged him toward the door. Julian fought them, his heels dragging on the carpet, screaming my name, screaming Martha's name, screaming about the money. As they reached the doorway, Julian managed to twist his head back one last time. "You are old," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You are going to die anyway. Why couldn't you just give it to me? You selfish old man. Why couldn't you just die?" The door closed behind them, but his screams echoed down the hallway, fading into the hum of the ventilation system. I stood in the center of the silent room. The lamp was broken on the floor. The water stain was drying on the carpet. The wine bottle lay in shards. It was a scene of destruction. My knees finally gave out. I did not fall. Martha was there. She caught me, her arms wrapping around my waist, holding me up with a strength that belied her age. "I have you," she whispered into my ear. "I have you, Robert. He is gone. I said the words feeling empty. He is really gone. He was gone a long time ago, Martha said fiercely. That thing that just left, that was a stranger. I looked at the smartwatch on my wrist. The recording was stopped. The evidence was secure. The police had him. The threat was neutralized. But I did not feel like a victor. I felt like a man standing in the rubble of his own home. Robert, Martha said, pulling back to look at my face. Your lips are gray. We need the paramedics. Now. Yes, I agreed weakly. Yes, I suppose we do. I looked around the room one last time. I had designed this tower to withstand earthquakes, typhoons, and time itself. I had accounted for every physical force in the universe. But I had failed to account for the one force that could destroy it from the inside: greed. Let us go, Martha, I said. I am ready to leave this floor. We walked out of the private suite, leaving the shattered glass and the shattered life behind us. The corridor leading to the service elevator was bathed in harsh, clinical LED light, a stark contrast to the warm, forgiving ambiance of the ballroom below. Here there were no shadows to hide in. Julian stood pressed against the concrete wall, his wrists bound behind him in stainless steel cuffs that reflected the overhead lights. He was no longer shouting. The adrenaline that had fueled his escape attempt had burned off, leaving behind a trembling, sweating wreck of a man who looked like he was about to vomit. Detective Miller stood in front of him, pulling on blue latex gloves with a sharp snap. Search him, Miller ordered the uniformed officer standing to Julian's left. Everything. Pocket, socks, lining. If he has a stick of gum, I want it bagged and tagged. You do not have a warrant, Julian mumbled, his voice thick with mucus and tears. This is illegal search and seizure. My lawyer will have this thrown out before breakfast. We have probable cause, Mr. Vance, Miller said, his voice flat and bored. We have a victim, your father, alleging an attempt on his life, and we have you fleeing the scene. Plus, you just assaulted a senior citizen in a recorded room. The search is incidental to a lawful arrest. Stand still. I stood 10 feet away, leaning against the wall next to Martha. My chest still ached with a dull, rhythmic throb, but my mind was clear. I watched the procedure with the detached gaze of a building inspector looking at a condemned structure. There was no pity in me. Pity is for accidents. This was not an accident. This was a demolition. The officer began the pat-down. He started at the shoulders, moving down the expensive Italian wool of Julian's suit jacket. He checked the outer pockets empty, save for a silk handkerchief. He moved to the trousers, a wallet, car keys. Then he moved to the inside breast pocket of the jacket, the pocket that sits right over the heart. The officer's hand paused. He felt a lump. He reached in and pulled out a small orange-brown amber bottle. Julian flinched, as if he had been burned. That is his, he blurted out, desperation making his voice crack. I told you I was carrying his medication. He is forgetful. I was keeping it safe for him. Miller took the bottle from the officer. He held it up to the light, just as I had done with the other bottle in the penthouse. Digoxin, Miller read the label. Prescribed to Robert Vance. He turned to me. Mr. Vance, do you have your medication on you? I do, I said. I reached into my own pocket and pulled out the bottle. Aris Thorne had just tested the one containing the digitalis and ephedrine mixture. But that bottle in your hand. Detective, that is the clean one. That is the decoy. Decoy, Miller asked. He swapped them. I explained, my voice steady. He took the real medication, the one you are holding out of my pocket earlier tonight, so I would not take it. Then he replaced it with the poison I am holding. He kept the real pills on him. Why, in case I died, and the police asked to see my medicine so he could produce the legitimate bottle and say, look, it was just his normal prescription. I looked at Julian. Or maybe you just forgot to throw it away. Sloppy work, Julian. You kept the control sample on your person. Test it, Julian spat. It is just heart medicine. You are crazy. We will, Miller said. We will test both bottles. And when the lab results show that the pills in your father's pocket, the ones you gave him, are lethal, and the ones in your pocket are harmless, that is possession of a controlled substance and tampering with evidence. And since you carried the antidote while feeding him the poison, that proves intent. Premeditation. Miller dropped the bottle into a plastic evidence bag. Zip. The sound was final. Keep looking, Miller told the officer. The officer continued the search. He reached into Julian's trouser pocket and pulled out his smartphone. It was a sleek black device, the screen cracked slightly from when he had dropped it during the struggle in the suite. It is locked, Julian sneered, and you are not getting the passcode. Good luck with the encryption. Miller looked at the phone. Then he looked at Julian. Mr. Vance, Miller said calmly, you are under arrest. Biometric data is not protected under the Fifth Amendment in this jurisdiction regarding immediate evidence collection during a felony arrest. Officer, hold his face. No, Julian screamed, twisting his head away. No, do not touch me. The officer, a burly man who looked like he had dealt with far worse than a spoiled executive, grabbed Julian's jaw with one hand and held the phone up with the other. Julian squeezed his eyes shut, screwing up his face like a petulant child refusing to eat vegetables. He is closing his eyes, the officer said. Fine, Miller said. Check the lock screen. Did any notifications come through recently? The officer tapped the screen to wake it. He squinted at the glowing display. Several missed calls, the officer reported, and a text message preview, received 4 minutes ago. Read it, Miller commanded. It is from a contact listed as Asset Management, the officer said. It says, tracking shows the target is still stationary. Is the package delivered? We are on the clock, Julian. Tonight is the deadline. Julian stopped struggling. He went completely limp in the officer's grip. And another one, the officer continued, scrolling down the notifications. Sent from this device 20 minutes ago, before the arrest. It says, do not worry. It is done. He is fading now. The transfer will trigger by morning. The money is coming. The silence in the hallway was absolute. The hum of the elevator seemed to roar in my ears. The money is coming, Miller repeated. He looked at Julian with a mixture of disgust and professional satisfaction. That is the ball game, Mr. Vance. Confession via text. Conspiracy to commit murder. Financial fraud. He bagged the phone. I looked at my son. He was staring at the floor, his face pale and slack. He looked small. He looked like a stranger. I tried to find some well of tears inside me, some reserve of fatherly grief, but there was nothing. The poison had not just attacked my heart, the betrayal had cauterized my soul. I felt hollowed out like a building gutted by fire, where only the exterior walls remained standing. Julian, I said. He did not look up. Look at me, I commanded. He slowly raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed and empty. You texted them while I was dying, I said. I was sitting there gasping for air, begging for water, and you were texting your loan sharks that it is done. You were counting my final breaths like coins. Julian started, then stopped. There was nothing left to say. The evidence was in the bag. Take him away, I said to Miller. I do not want him in my building. We are taking him out the back, Miller said. Mr. Vance, I need you to come to the station to give a formal statement, but first the paramedics need to clear you. One moment, detective, I said. I walked over to the wall of the corridor, where a small unobtrusive digital panel was mounted at eye level. It was the environmental control interface for this sector of the tower. There is one more thing, I said. One more piece of evidence you need to collect. It is not in his pockets. It is in the air. Miller frowned. The air. I taught Julian everything he knows about building management, I said, tapping the screen to wake up the system. I entered my master override code. The screen flashed green. I taught him that a building is a living organism. It breathes. We control the oxygen, the temperature, the humidity. We control the comfort of the people inside. I navigated to the history logs for the HVAC system, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. I pulled up the data for the ballroom and the VIP lounge for the last 3 hours. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the graph. Miller stepped closer, peering at the jagged red lines on the display. "What am I looking at?" "This is the carbon dioxide and oxygen saturation levels," I explained, my voice turning into the cold, clinical tone of the engineer. "Standard building code requires fresh air intake to be set at 20% to maintain an indoor oxygen level of roughly 21%. That keeps people alert and healthy." I pointed to a sharp dip in the graph starting at 6 o'clock that evening. At 6:15, I said, "Someone manually overrode the system. They shut down the fresh air intake dampers for the ballroom to 5%. They increased the recirculation rate. Do you see the CO2 levels rising? Not enough to trigger the fire alarm or suffocate anyone instantly, just enough to make the air heavy, stale." "Why would he do that?" Miller asked. "To mask the symptoms," I said, "and to accelerate the failure. The poison he gave me, digitalis, causes shortness of breath. It makes the heart struggle to pump oxygenated blood. By lowering the oxygen in the room, he made my heart work harder. He created an environment designed to stress a compromised cardiovascular system. He was not just poisoning me, detective. He was using the building itself to squeeze the life out of me." I scrolled down to the user log. User J. Vance. Action manual override. Dampers closed. Time, 18:15. "He turned the room into a kill box," I said. "He wanted me to feel dizzy. He wanted me to think it was just the heat, the crowd, the stuffy air. He weaponized the ventilation." Miller stared at the screen, then back at Julian. The disgust on his face deepened. "That is diabolical," Miller muttered. "He tried to suffocate 300 people just to make sure you died." "Collateral damage," I said. "He knew the guests would just feel a bit tired, maybe leave early. But for me, with the poison in my blood, it was a death sentence." I turned to look at Julian one last time. He was shrinking against the wall, unable to meet my eyes. He knew that I knew. He knew that I had seen the depth of his calculation. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was an engineering project. He had drafted the blueprints for my death with the same software I used to build hospitals. "You were a good student, Julian," I said softly. "You learned everything I taught you about how to control a building, but you forgot the first rule of engineering." He looked up, his lip trembling. "Safety factors," I said. "You always build in a redundancy. You always assume the primary system will fail. You assumed I was the primary system. You assumed I was old and weak. You forgot that I have a backup." I nodded at Martha. She stood there, unmoving, a pillar of strength. "Get him out of here," I said, turning my back on him. Miller nodded to the officers. They grabbed Julian by the arms and began to march him toward the freight elevator. "Dad," Julian cried out as they dragged him away. "Dad, I am sorry, I did not mean for the air. I just wanted to be sure, Dad." I did not turn around. I listened to the sound of his footsteps fading, the scuffle of shoes on concrete, the ding of the elevator arrival, and finally the heavy metal doors sliding shut. The silence returned to the hallway. I stared at the HVAC panel. I reached out and tapped the reset button. System normalizing. Fresh air intake 100%. I watched the numbers climb. The red line of the CO2 dropped. The blue line of the oxygen rose. The building was breathing again. It was purging the bad air, flushing out the toxicity. "Mr. Vance?" I turned. Detective Miller was still there, holding the evidence bags. "We have everything we need," Miller said respectfully. "The bottle, the phone, the recording, the HVAC logs. He is not walking away from this. I can promise you that." "Good," I said. "But I want more than a promise, detective." I walked closer to him, towering over him despite my exhaustion. I let the full weight of my influence, my money, and my rage settle into my voice. I know how the system works, I said. I know about bail. I know about plea deals. I know about high-priced lawyers who can argue that a son was just misguided or under duress from loan sharks. I know they will try to paint him as a victim of extortion who panicked. Miller nodded slowly. The defense will certainly try that angle. I want you to ensure that does not happen, I said. He attempted to murder me. He endangered 300 guests in my tower. He committed fraud on an industrial scale. I want him charged with everything. Attempted murder in the first degree, reckless endangerment, wire fraud, elder abuse. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. And I want you to tell the district attorney, I continued, that Robert Vance is not a confused old man. Tell him that if he offers my son a deal, any deal, I will spend every penny of the fortune Julian tried to steal to bury the DA's career. Do you understand me? Miller swallowed. He straightened up. I understand, sir. We will book him on all counts. With the evidence you gave us, he is looking at 20 to life. Minimum. Make it life, I said. He forfeited his life when he tried to take mine. We will do our best, Miller said. Now please, Mr. Vance, the paramedics are waiting. You really need to get that checked out. I am going, I said. I took Martha's arm. We walked toward the elevator. Not the freight elevator Julian had used, but the private executive lift. The doors slid open silently. We stepped inside. As the doors closed, shutting out the sterile hallway, I leaned my head back against the mirrored wall. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a crushing fatigue. You were brilliant, Martha whispered, squeezing my hand. I was a father, I said, my voice sounding hollow in the small space. And now I am a witness. You are a survivor, she corrected. We will see, I said. The trial hasn't even started yet. The elevator descended, taking us down to the ground floor, down to the flashing lights of the ambulance, down to the world, where everyone would soon know that the great Robert Vance had built a skyscraper on quicksand. But at least the building was still standing, and so was I. The ballroom of the Vance Tower was a sea of confusion. The orchestra had stopped playing, leaving a jagged silence that was quickly filled by the murmur of 500 of Seattle's wealthiest citizens. They were holding their champagne flutes, looking around, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. The air was no longer heavy. The ventilation system was humming efficiently now, but the mood was suffocating. Then the doors to the service corridor burst open. It was not the grand entrance Julian had planned for himself as the new CEO. It was a perp walk. 4 uniformed officers flanked him, marching him straight through the center of the room toward the main exit. His hands were cuffed behind his back, his expensive suit jacket bunched up, his tie askew. He looked like a man whose soul had been evicted from his body. A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. Cameras flashed, not the professional ones hired for the event, but hundreds of smartphones raised in unison. The live stream of the century was beginning. Let me go, Julian shouted, trying to find a friendly face in the crowd. It is a mistake. Tell them who I am. He locked eyes with a city councilman he had played golf with just last week. The councilman turned his back. He looked at a major investor. The investor raised his phone to record. Julian Vance. The golden boy of Seattle real estate was being dragged out like common trash. I watched from the mezzanine balcony, flanked by Martha and the paramedics who were monitoring my vitals. My heart rate was steadying thanks to the medication, but my spirit was shattered. Yet I knew what I had to do. Silence would breed rumors. Rumors would kill the company. I had to control the demolition. Mr. Vance, you need to go to the hospital, the paramedic urged. In a moment, I said. Hand me the microphone. I walked to the railing. I did not look like the titan of industry they expected. I looked pale, old, and weary, but when I tapped the microphone, the sound echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, My voice was rough, but it carried to the back of the room. 500 faces turned up toward me. They saw me standing there alive while my son was being shoved into the back of a police cruiser outside. "There will be no toast tonight," I announced. "There will be no celebration. Tonight the Vance Tower is a crime scene." Murmurs erupted. I raised a hand demanding silence. "You saw my son being led away." I continued speaking the words that tasted like bile. "You are wondering why. I will not hide the truth from you. Tonight Julian Vance attempted to murder me to seize control of this company and cover his own financial crimes." The shock in the room was palpable. A physical wave of disbelief. "He poisoned me," I said, pointing to the empty stage where the video montage of my life had played. "He manipulated the air you are breathing to mask the symptoms. He forged documents. He embezzled millions. He betrayed every person in this room who trusted him." I gripped the railing. "I apologize," I said. "I apologize for bringing a criminal into your midst. I apologize for not seeing the rot in my own foundation sooner. But know this: Apex Structural Solutions is not Julian Vance. It is me. And I am still standing." I looked out at the sea of stunned faces. "Effective immediately, Julian Vance is terminated from all positions. We will be conducting a full forensic audit. We will cooperate fully with the district attorney, and we will rebuild trust brick by brick. Thank you. Please go home." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a thud that signaled the end of an era. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. By the time the ambulance arrived at Seattle Grace Hospital, the story was already trending globally. Billionaire son arrested at gala. Real-time murder plot. Foiled by censors. The video of Julian being dragged out was everywhere. The recording of his confession, leaked strategically by my legal team to key journalists, was being dissected by cable news pundits. I spent the night in the cardiac intensive care unit, hooked up to machines that flushed the digitalis from my blood. Martha sat in the chair next to my bed, her phone in one hand, a legal pad in the other. We did not sleep. We worked. "The lawyers are here," Martha said at 3 a.m. "In the waiting room. They have the papers." "Bring them in," I said. 3 attorneys from our top firm entered looking disheveled but focused. They spread documents over my hospital bed covers. "We are moving fast," the lead counsel. A sharp woman named Elena said, "We are executing a complete disinheritance. We are removing Julian as a beneficiary from the Vance family trust, the life insurance policies, and the will. We are invoking the Slayer Rule Clause statutes that prevent a murderer from inheriting from their victim. Since he attempted murder, the civil grounds are solid." "Strip him," I said, signing the papers with a hand that still trembled slightly. "He gets nothing. Not a share of stock. Not a square foot of land. Not a single cufflink." "What about his defense?" Martha asked. "He will claim insanity or coercion." "We are burying that defense," Elena said. "We are releasing the financial records of his embezzlement tomorrow morning. It establishes a rational, albeit criminal motive. Greed, panic, not insanity." "And Rebecca?" I asked. "She is in custody," Elena reported. "The police picked her up at the house an hour ago. She was packing bags. They found a one-way ticket to Zurich in her purse. She is singing like a canary. She claims she knew about the debt, but not the poison. She is trying to cut a deal." "Let her sing," I said, "as long as the song ends with Julian in a cell." As the sun began to rise over Seattle, casting a pale gray light through the hospital window, Elena handed me one final document. It was a discovery from the digital forensics team who had been scouring Julian's laptop all night. "You need to see this," Elena said softly. "It is difficult." "I have been poisoned by my own son," I said. "I think I can handle difficult." I took the tablet. It was a draft of an email unsent dated 2 days ago. It was addressed to the State Adult Protective Services. Subject: concern regarding Martha Vance. I read the body of the email. To whom it may concern, I am writing to formally report my concerns about my mother, Martha Vance. Her mental state has deteriorated rapidly. She has become paranoid and forgetful. I believe she is neglecting my father's care. She often forgets his medication dosages. I fear she may be inadvertently overdosing him due to dementia. I request an immediate evaluation for competency and potential guardianship transfer to myself. I stopped reading. The tablet shook in my hands. He wasn't just planning to kill me. He was planning to frame Martha. He was going to blame my death on her negligence. He was going to have his own mother declared incompetent, locked away in a facility, so he could take control of her share of the estate too. He was going to paint her as the senile wife who accidentally killed her husband with the wrong pills. He wrote this, I whispered. He drafted it, Elena confirmed. He was going to send it the morning after you died, to set the narrative, to make sure no one questioned why you had too much digitalis in your system. Mom got confused. Mom gave him the wrong pills. I looked at Martha. She was reading over my shoulder. Her face was dangerously still. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the words that proved her son viewed her not as a mother, but as a scapegoat. He wanted to destroy us both, Martha said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. He wanted to kill you and bury me alive in a nursing home. I reached out and took her hand. It was cold. He is a monster, I said, and monsters do not get to inherit the kingdom. I looked at the lawyers. Release it, I commanded. Release this email to the press. Leak it. I want the world to know. I want the jury to know. I want everyone to see that he was willing to sacrifice his mother to cover his tracks. It will be brutal, Mr. Vance, Elena warned. The public scrutiny. I do not care about scrutiny, I said. I care about the truth. Burn him down. Burn it all down until there is nothing left but the cell bars. The next few days were a blur of headlines and legal maneuvers. The media dubbed it the Tower of Treason. Julian's face was on every screen, usually juxtaposed with his mugshot, a picture of a terrified crying man that bore little resemblance to the arrogant executive he had been. Apex stock took a hit, diving 15% on Monday morning. But then something strange happened. I held a press conference from the hospital atrium. I spoke candidly about the betrayal, about the safeguards we were implementing, about the resilience of the company. I didn't spin it. I owned it. By Tuesday closing, the stock had rebounded. The market respected the honesty. They respected the fact that the old lion was still roaring. Julian was denied bail. The judge citing the flight risk, the vast sums of missing money, and the heinous nature of the evidence specifically. The plot against his mother remanded him to the King County Jail. I watched the arraignment on the TV in my hospital room. Julian pleaded, "Not guilty," his voice barely audible. He looked at the camera once, searching, perhaps hoping I was watching. I turned the TV off. "He is done," Martha said, packing her bag. "The lawyers say the trial will be a formality. The audio, the video, the pills, the emails. He will never see the outside of a prison again." "Good," I said. "Now help me get dressed." "You are not discharged yet," Martha argued. "I am discharging myself," I said, standing up. My legs were weak, but they held. "I have a company to run, and I have a nursery to clear out." "A nursery?" "Julian's old room," I said. "The photos, the trophies, the memories. I want them gone. I want the house empty of him before we go home." Martha looked at me, then nodded. She understood. We weren't just cleaning house. We were performing an exorcism. We walked out of the hospital into the flashing bulbs of the paparazzi. I didn't hide. I put my arm around my wife, lifted my chin, and walked straight to the waiting car. The headline the next day read, "The Architect Rebuilds." But inside the car, as the tinted windows rolled up, I let my head fall back against the seat. "We survived," I said. "Yes," Martha replied, staring out at the passing city. But survival has a high price. We paid it, I said. Now let us make sure we never have to pay it again. The empire of lies. Julian had built the fake projects, the fake persona, the fake love had collapsed in spectacular fashion. All that remained was the truth. And the truth was a lonely place to live. But at least it was solid ground. It has been exactly 6 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days since the night I watched my son being dragged out of the Vance Tower in handcuffs. Seattle has turned gray again, the relentless Pacific Northwest rain washing over the city, streaking the glass walls of my penthouse like tears that the sky is crying on my behalf. The silence in this apartment is absolute. There are no grandchildren running through the halls, no family dinners being planned for the holidays, no phone calls asking for advice on load-bearing walls or market trends. To an outsider, this silence might sound like loneliness. It might sound like the hollow echo of a broken home. But to Martha and me, it sounds like something else entirely. It sounds like safety. It sounds like the steady rhythmic hum of a structure that has survived a catastrophic failure and is still standing. We sit here in the evenings, reading our books, drinking tea, never whiskey, not anymore, and we exist in the peaceful vacuum of the survivors. Julian is currently residing in the Washington State Penitentiary. The trial was swift, brutal, and public. The evidence we collected, the audio recording of his confession, the video of him pouring the water, the poisoned pills, the HVAC logs, was insurmountable. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The judge, a stern woman who seemed particularly disgusted by the email Julian had drafted to frame his mother, showed no leniency. 25 years. That was the sentence. Conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder in the first degree, wire fraud, and elder abuse. He will be eligible for parole when he is 60 years old. I will be 93 by then, if I am still walking this earth. The letters started arriving a month ago. They come in plain white envelopes stamped with the prison's censor mark. Martha brings them in from the mailbox, holding them by the corner, as if they are contaminated with anthrax. She places them on my desk. "Another one," she says softly. I look at them. I recognize the handwriting, though it is shakier now, stripped of the arrogant flourish it used to have. I can imagine what is inside. Pleas for forgiveness. Claims that he has found God. Claims that he was manipulated by the loan sharks, that he was not in his right mind. Or perhaps just more requests for money for the commissary. I do not know what is inside because I never open them. I have a shredder next to my desk. It is a heavy-duty industrial model, the kind that can chew through credit cards and staples. Every time a letter arrives, I feed it into the machine. I watch the white paper turn into confetti. I do not feel guilt. I do not feel sadness. I feel the satisfaction of removing debris from a job site. Some people tell me I am cold. My pastor asked me if I could find it in my heart to visit him. "He is your flesh and blood," the pastor said. "He is a lost sheep." I told the pastor that some sheep are not lost. They are wolves in wool. And when a wolf tries to eat the shepherd, you do not invite it back into the fold. You build a higher fence. I refuse to put him on my visitation list. I refuse to accept his collect calls. I erased him from the will, from the trust, and from the company history. In the lobby of the Vance Tower, where his portrait used to hang next to mine, there is now a blank wall of polished granite. It looks better that way. Cleaner. I spend a lot of time these days standing at the window, looking out at the skyline I helped build. I look at the Vance Tower rising 110 stories into the mist. It is a magnificent beast of steel and glass. But when I look at it now, I do not just see engineering. I see a lesson. For 40 years I believed that the strongest foundation was made of reinforced concrete and deep pilings. I believed that if you calculated the math correctly, if you accounted for wind shear and seismic drift, the building would stand forever. I was wrong. The strongest foundation is not made of concrete. It is made of truth. It is made of vigilance. I built a skyscraper, but I built a family on sand. I assumed that love was enough to hold the structure together. I assumed that because I gave my son everything, the education, the job, the money, the status, he would return that investment with loyalty. I ignored the stress fractures. I ignored the greed in his eyes when he looked at my watch. I ignored the entitlement in his voice when he spoke to the staff. I let the dead load accumulate until it nearly crushed me. I learned the hard way that you cannot engineer a human soul. You cannot retrofit a conscience into a man who lacks one. Martha joins me at the window. She places her hand on my back. She has aged in the last 6 months. The shock of the betrayal took a toll on her, etching deeper lines around her eyes. But she is stronger too. She walks with a new kind of certainty. She is the woman who saved my life. She is the one who saw the cracks when I was too blind to look down. "What are you thinking about?" she asks. "The tourniquet," I say. It is a concept I have been turning over in my mind, a philosophy that has become my new gospel. People say blood flows in one stream, I tell her, watching the rain streak the glass. They say family is a river that carries you. But they are wrong. Blood is just a biological fluid. And like any fluid, it can become toxic. It can carry disease. It can carry poison. I turn to face her. When a limb goes gangrenous, Martha, you do not pray for it to heal. You do not hug it and hope the rot goes away. If you do that, the infection spreads to the heart and you die. No. You apply a tourniquet. You cut off the flow. You sever the connection completely, and then you amputate. It sounds harsh. I know it does. To the outside world, to the parents who have never stared into the eyes of a child who is waiting for them to die, it sounds like monstrosity. They talk about unconditional love. They talk about forgiveness. But forgiveness is a luxury for those who are safe. For those of us who have felt the knife against our throat, forgiveness is a liability. Self-preservation, I whisper. That is the only moral imperative that matters in the end. It is not selfish to want to live. It is not selfish to protect the time you have left. God gave me this life. He gave me these 68 years. It is my duty to protect that gift, even if the threat comes from my own DNA. I think about the grandpa stories. I used to hear stories of old men fleeced by strangers, scammed by phone calls. My story is different. My scammer sat at my dinner table every Sunday. He wore my last name. He kissed my cheek. I will not let love make me blind again, I say to Martha. I will not let nostalgia become a weakness. Martha nods. She understands. She felt the same knife. She was the one he planned to frame. She was the collateral damage in his business plan. We are safe now, she says quietly. We are, I agree, because we made ourselves safe. We turn away from the window. The city lights are blinking on below us, a grid of electricity and life. Somewhere down there in a cold cell, Julian is probably sleeping or staring at the ceiling, wondering where he went wrong. He probably still blames the market. He probably still blames me. It does not matter what he thinks. He is yesterday's weather. I walk to the wall panel near the front door. It is the new security interface I installed last month. It is military grade. Biometric scanners, motion detectors, thermal imaging. Ready for the night, I ask. Ready, Martha says. We go through the ritual. It is a holy rite for us now. I check the perimeter sensors. Green. I check the elevator locks. Secure. I check the backup generator. Online. I check the cameras in the hallway. Clear. I tap the screen. System arming. The panel beeps. A solid, reassuring sound. The heavy steel bolts in the front door slide home with a loud mechanical clank. It is the sound of a drawbridge being raised. I take Martha's hand. Her skin is warm. Her pulse is steady. We are two old trees standing in a cleared forest battered by the storm, stripped of some branches, but our roots are deep, and we are still standing upright. We walk toward the bedroom. The penthouse is quiet. The silence is not empty. It is full of truth. It is full of the peace that comes from knowing exactly who is on your side and who is not. I am Robert Vance. I am 68 years old. I have lost a son, but I have kept my life. And as I lay my head down on the pillow next to my wife, I know one thing for certain. I will sleep tonight. But I will never ever sleep with my eyes closed again. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a painful journey to recount, but if my experience can save even one person from the betrayal I endured, then it was worth reopening these wounds. I want to know where you are listening from. Are you safe in your home in London driving through the rain in Seattle, or maybe watching from a quiet room in Sydney? Please comment your city below. I read every single one, and it helps me feel less alone in this big world. If you believe that justice should always prevail, and that we must protect ourselves, even from those we love, please subscribe to the channel Bittersweet Revenge. Hit that like button to show your support and smash the hype button, so this story can reach more people who might need this warning. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and trust your instincts.